And as we are preparing the meeting, we will be waiting for the ministers. My apologies that there has been some confusion with respect to voting, and I didn't want the committee waiting here if we were being called for votes. However, the ministers are both on their way, so we'll just take a moment. If there's any other business people want to bring, I'm happy to do that, or I can suspend for a moment. I'll suspend. So we just this meeting to order, and this is the 144th meeting of the. Could I have your attention, please, members on the Liberal side? And could I please have quiet in the room? Thank you. Calling this meeting to order, meeting 144 of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, for the consideration of supplementary estimates B 2018 to 19. We're specifically dealing with votes 1B, 10B, and 15B under the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. We thank the Minister for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship for joining us, as well as the Minister for Borders. Remind me of the name. Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction. It's a big name. Thank you for joining us, and I invite you. We are waiting to see how much time we'll have, but we're going to get as much of you as we can get. You're invited to give opening remarks, and then we'll turn to members of the committee who may have some questions for you on the supplementary estimates. Begin with Minister Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, I'm pleased to be back in this discuss my department's supplementary estimates B for fiscal year 2018-2019. Minister Blair and I are accompanied by Martha Morgan, the Deputy Minister of IRCC, as well as a number of other senior officials, and I thank them for being here today. Monsieur le Président, nous demandons...
Mr. Chair, for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada's supplementary estimates B, we are seeking a proposed net increase of $192 million in resources.
This increase, $114.7 million, is to support higher volumes of asylum seekers. In a moment, Minister Blair will expand on the government's actions in this matter. These estimates also include an additional $69.2 million in funding to Quebec to support resettlement, settlement, and integration services in line with the Canada-Quebec Accord on Immigration. Under this accord, we continue to share responsibility and collaboration with Quebec on immigration and settlement issues. Also included in the estimates is $4.6 million in funding to expand biometrics. This is not new funding, but rather a reprofiling of funding from the previous year to better match planned expenditures under this initiative. Biometrics screening has proven to be very effective in protecting the safety and security of Canadians, and by expanding our biometrics program, we are facilitating entry into Canada and further protecting the integrity of our immigration system by quickly and accurately being able, through biometrics, to establish a traveler's identity. Mr. Chair, these estimates also include $3.2 million to fund the 2018 to 2020 Immigration Levels Plan. This is also not new funding, but reprofiling of existing funding to better reflect the level of effort within 2018-2019. Mr. Chair, the multi-year levels immigration plan for 2019 to 2021 responsibly and gradually grows the number of permanent residents that Canada welcomes annually. We have heard from economists, employers, businesses, leaders, and Canadians in both urban and rural areas that Canada needs immigration to address our labour market challenges, support economic growth, and create more middle-class jobs. That is why we've developed immigration programs that are tailored to meet the needs of Canadian communities and the Canadian economy. For example, the Startup Visa program enables foreign entrepreneurs who start innovative businesses to come to Canada and scale up as permanent residents. The Global Skills Strategy gets highly skilled temporary workers into our country faster. Almost 30,000 vacancies that are critical to Canadian businesses in their growth and addressing their skills shortages have already been filled through this program. The lessons we've learned from the success in the Atlantic Immigration Program, as well as the Provincial Nominee Program, have informed our newly launched Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program, a program that is meant to address the needs of smaller communities across Canada, to fill their specific labour gaps, and to enable them to benefit more from immigration. In terms of processing, we have done a lot as a government to reduce wait times and eliminate backlogs. For example, in the spousal program in 2016, spouses were waiting as long as 26 months on average to have their applications processed faster. Now, spousal applicants' wait times have decreased to an average of only 12 months. A few years ago, the backlog in the caregiver program was 62,000. It is now down 90%. And families under the caregiver program were waiting between 5 to 7 years to reunite. It now takes 12 months to process their applications. We've reunited many families as a result of that. While the parents and grandparents program continues to be very popular with very high volumes, the wait times, again, for this program have come down from 7 years to a little less than 2 years. Canadians also want to know whether we have a plan to integrate these newcomers, and which is why we're also placing a major focus on settlement and integration programs. And recent research suggests that this is paying off. Statistics Canada's Labour Force Survey for 2018 December shows that the unemployment rate for working age immigrants aged 25 to 54 years of age was only 5.7%. This is the lowest unemployment rate for this group of newcomers since the survey began looking into this in 2006. Monsieur le Président, notre gouvernement est...
Mr. Speaker, or Chair rather, our government believes that our immigration system continues to benefit both newcomers and all of Canada.
Je suis convaincu.
I trust that the initiatives I have noted today demonstrate our ongoing commitment to meeting these goals.
This time, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister Messi. Minister Blair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as my colleague, Mr. Hussain, has indicated, included in these estimates before you today is a total of $114.7 million, which is provided to ensure continued security at our border and fast, efficient, thorough processing of asylum claims. The $114.7 million is comprised of $100 million for the assistance provided by the Government of Canada to be made available to provincial governments during this fiscal year, and an additional $14.7 million for other initiatives that I will also outline shortly. Mr. Chair, with this funding, the government continues to implement its plan to continue effectively managing and addressing the issue of irregular migration. And as part of this plan, we remain committed to working collaboratively with provincial and municipal partners on the delivery of services to asylum claimants and irregular migrants, including as it pertains to temporary housing. And Mr. Speaker, I am proud to tell you that we continue to assess all claimants in a respectful and humane way. We provide them with needed services while their claims are being decided. Canadian law is being upheld and applied in an appropriate way. This includes interim federal health care and the early provision of work permits so that they may live independently while they are undergoing the process of determining their eligibility as assignment claimants. And when it comes to processing work permits, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to beat and exceed our 30-day service standard on issuing work permits to asylum claimants. IRCC continues to work closely with all involved parties to ensure contingency plans are continuously updated and ready to respond to any future fluctuations. We will also continue to monitor conditions and developments in other countries to inform our planning and where we see trends emerging to adjust our plans. Budget 2018 has invested, as my colleague has said, over $174 million towards managing irregular migration by ensuring security at our border and to facilitate faster processing of asylum claims. And we are already beginning to see results from this work. In 2018, the number of irregular asylum claims decided by Immigration and the Refugee Board has increased by 95% compared to the previous year of 2017. In addition, we are proactively engaging other countries to deter irregular migration, and this includes direct and ongoing communication with the United States government and other governments around the world. Mr. Speaker, let me assure the honourable members of this committee that we are working hard to maintain the integrity and the security of our border. Everyone who crosses our border irregularly is intercepted, detained, and subject to a thorough security screening, including biometrics. both photograph and fingerprint, which are taken at the border. Eligible asylum claims are then referred to the Immigration and Refugee Board for an independent assessment, and all individuals who are found not to be in need of Canada's protection are subject to removal. Mr. Chair, the actions we have taken are consistent with the balance we are seeking to achieve, a balance of ensuring that Canada is a place for those who genuinely need protection, but also safeguarding the integrity of our immigration system and the safety and security of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Just a note that there is a debate going on in the House at the current time, and we do expect to have bells, but I think we will be able to continue through, and if we have unanimous consent, we can continue through and be able to get the full time with the ministers. Monsieur Ayoub, on va commencer avec vous, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Ayoub, we'll start with you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ministers, ladies and gentlemen from the departments. Obviously, immigration is an important challenge and an important response to a labor shortage. Mr. Hussein, you talked about the results with regard to the integration of immigrants, and the unemployment rate for newcomers is low. But it is a challenge when it comes to labor shortages, particularly in Quebec. I would like you to tell me in greater detail about the processing timelines. How have you reduced from 7 to 2 years the processing times, be it for family reunification or for the acceptance of newcomers? Obviously, the processing time is key when it comes to newcomers and family reunification, because newcomers make an important contribution to Canada. Please give me more details.
It's a very, very important question. When families are kept apart unnecessarily, it's not fair on them, and we should do whatever we can to reunite them. And the spousal program is an example. You asked me how we were able to do it. We were able to dedicate more resources and a bit of a focus by the department, and I want to really give credit where credit is due to the officials who worked tirelessly to reduce that processing time from an average of 26 months down to 12 months. And it's working. It's holding at 12 months or less. And as a result of that, many couples have been reunited as a result of that. In addition to that, those who were in the backlog that we inherited are now reunited. So that's important. But it's not just that. In the caregiver category, the backlog is down by more than 90%. In the parent and grandparent category, the same thing. We're dealing with people who are separated and kept apart unnecessarily, because we know that we could have done better, and we have done better by making the necessary investments and reaching. But it's not just that, it's also introducing new programs to address the needs of employers who've told us that it takes too long to get talent to Canada. So the Global Skills Strategy has shortened the time to process highly skilled temporary workers coming into Canada from a high of 7 months to 2 weeks. That's a huge cultural shift and change, and employers are very happy with that across the country. And we need to continue to be that aggressive when it comes to also bringing in talent to Canada, because investment follows talent.
Vous venez devant nous et vous nous demandez, parce qu'on est...
You're coming before us, and we're studying the supplementary estimates be here. Is this a political will, or rather an economic one, that ensured that the backlog in processing times was decreased? Because I see the efforts that you're asking of the departments, and you give the credit to those people, and they deserve it. But people had been left on waiting lists for years. Was this a political reason, or was it rather economic? There wasn't enough money. There wasn't a desire to invest in the processing times. What changed?
Yeah, I think both. You're absolutely right. It took both. It took leadership and an ambitious goal, but it also took investments. It took the necessary investments to make sure that we can process people faster and reunite more families, but also introduce new programs that were suggested to us by the business community. A lot of the good things that we have done in the immigration system have come directly from Canadians. And that is because we've spoken to them, we get their feedback, we have, I crisscross the country having town halls and roundtable meetings, listening to employers, listening to settlement, service delivery organizations, municipal leaders, and so on, and ordinary Canadians to make sure that we double down on what's going right and we listen to them on what more they would like us to do to improve the system.
Je voudrais peut-être adresser un peu mes questions aussi dans le même sens.
I would also like to speak to Minister Blair with regard to security, border security at that. Is the same principle applicable in terms of the economic and political will? We had to invest and get monies reinvested in security because in the past this had been cut and there was not monies invested, and now things have changed.
Well, what I can tell you is that, first of all, we will never compromise the safety and security of our citizens, and there is an exceptional amount of good work being done at all across our border. We have made significant investments to ensure that we have adequate resources, both RCMP, CBSA, and IRCC at the border to process everyone that comes into this country. It has required a redeployment of resources and some additional resources to be dedicated to manage this effectively. Everyone that comes to the border who comes in any fashion, over 95 million people were processed last year by CBSA, is screened to determine, to ensure that there is no risk of criminality or national security. But anyone who crosses the border irregularly is actually subject to a significantly enhanced screening process. And they are detained by the RCMP. They are subject to significant and rigorous background checks and interviews. Biometrics are taken, and every step that is necessary is taken to ensure that anyone entering the country irregularly is subject to rigorous screening to prevent someone coming in who represents either a threat of criminality or security. And frankly, our commitment to doing that is a commitment to be able to reassure Canadians that this situation is being managed safely. And I often hear questions and concerns raised that this is a safety issue, and it's important to be able to reassure Canadians that every effort is being made to ensure that Canadian law is upheld and that the security and safety of our citizens is always our first priority.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to be a bit tight on time today to try to keep us going. Ms. Rempel.
Thank you. Ministers, it's my understanding, based on statements that both you and the Prime Minister have made, that it's the opinion of your government that the Safe Third Country Agreement still applies. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. So what we're here today to do is to examine the supplementary estimates. That's where you're coming to us to ask for the committee to vote in favor of the big line item in here, which is $114 million to pay for housing and social services for people who have illegally entered the country from upstate New York and have subsequently claimed asylum in Canada. Is that's what you're asking us to do today, is to vote in favor of that expenditure?
What we're asking for is the money that is required for those individuals who have claimed asylum in Canada, that they are entitled under Canadian law to due process, and while that process is taking place, that we would provide them with temporary shelter.
Okay, so I think what we're confused about, and many Canadians are confused about, is that on one hand you say that the Safe Third Country Agreement, or the agreement that we have with the United States, that essentially says that you can't claim asylum in one country if you do it in the other, applies. But then you're coming to us in a very large deficit situation while you're increasing taxes on Canadians on things like the carbon tax to vote in favor of spending $114 million on hotels and social welfare payments who, if they had entered the country legally, would not be able to claim asylum. So basically what you're asking us to do is to vote in favor of spending $114 million on hotels and social welfare payments for people who have reached upstate New York. Is that correct?
No, it's not. Actually, what we are asking.
So you don't want us to vote in favor of $114 million for illegal border crossers, or you do? I'm just like, what are you here to do? Like, we're all confused.
I would like to provide
on
an answer to your question, if I may.
Well, first of all, I think you've provided a lot of confusion to Canadians with this. I'm going to try a different approach. You've got this request in front of us, and Canadians are watching. Do you think that it is fair to spend $114 million when you've had the Prime Minister go to Edmonton and tell a veteran that he's been asking more that he can give, while you're increasing taxes on Canadians, while there's a backlog of 70,000 cases plus for people who are being privately sponsored as refugees from places like northern Iraq? Do you think that it is fair, in your estimation, either of you, to even come to committee to ask us to spend that money? Like, is it fair? Is this something that you want Canadians to think is a fair thing?
And what I would tell Canadians is that when people come to this country seeking asylum, they are entitled under Canadian law and by an international agreement of which we are signatories.
But you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to say...
But they are entitled to due process, and during that process, we are not going to... Their families,
you don't
Michelle,
get to
and
have it
they're people
both
out on the
third.
street. We're not going to leave them out on the street or in the snow.
We're
going to accommodate them.
York, right?
I would just interrupt for one moment, please.
No, this is my time.
I know I'm the chair. You may be chair one day, but right now I am the chair, and I'm going to request that you do not speak over the witness when the witness is speaking, and that is out of respect for the interpreters who cannot interpret you. And we have a country which respects both official languages, and if we are going to maintain decorum in this committee and respect for both official languages, I will interrupt anyone who is speaking over someone when they're speaking.
Well, I think, Chair, frankly, I think a lot of Canadians can't interpret what's being said here. Because on one hand, they're saying that the Safe Third Country Agreement applies, that the United States is a safe country, people have reached a safe country. And on the other hand, they're asking us to spend $114 million on hotels and social welfare payments for illegal border crossers. That is a circle we can't square. The reality is you keep spending this money. You keep coming to us unbudgeted, more and more. So don't you think that you're just asking Canadians to pay for your mistake, your joint and your Prime Minister's failure to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement, your hashtag Welcome to Canada mistake? Why are you asking Canadians to vote in favor of supporting your mistake?
If you like.
Mr. Chair, the preposterous idea that refugees leave their homes because of a tweet is an insult to those who seek protection. We have a system in Canada that determines who's a refugee and who isn't, and that's the system that we have. And
thank you.
It's an
I would
independent
like
system.
the floor, Chair. Thank you.
And to suggest
Thank
that
you,
the
Chair. I would
Conservatives
like the
actually
floor.
cared about refugees is laughable.
This is my time. I would like the chair, the floor, Chair. Thank you.
All committee members that the time that is here belongs to the committee, and the member has time to ask a question, and that witnesses have time to answer a question, because that is the way committees work. If the member would like to continue, may continue, but I ask that you allow the witnesses to answer out of respect.
I appreciate that the Liberals lately have been preventing strong women from speaking, but I will continue to speak. Thank you, Chair. Do you think that it is fair that Canadians accept you coming over and over to this committee asking for hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for hotels with no indefinite end? There's no end in sight. There's more people coming. On one hand, you say the Safe Third Country Agreement applies. On the other hand, you say the United States is not a safe third country. Let's pay for all of this. Why are you doing this? Like, make a decision one way or another. Don't just come to Canadians and say, you know what? Somebody in upstate New York is going to get priority access over veterans, increasing in carbon tax. Like, that's what you're asking us to do here. Why should Canadians look at you and say that anybody on this committee should support paying $114 million to pay for the hotels for illegal border crossers?
The families that are here who have made an asylum claim under law, Canadian law, are entitled to due process. And while that due process is taking place, we do provide, and working with municipalities in the provinces, temporary shelter so that they may have a roof over their head.
The reality is,
and most of the people that are coming are, in fact,
gave us yesterday
families with children.
I don't gavel very often. I will gavel today. And I ask the member to again respect the witness. You've asked a question. Give them a chance to answer and do not speak over them. When they've finished, it is your time.
You know what, Mr. Chair? I'm kind of tired of being shut down by Liberals. I am.
That is also time. We now move to Ms. Kwan.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I still had time left, and you are shutting me down. Why are you shutting another woman down from speaking and asking questions? That's exactly what's happening here. And I challenge your ruling to move on to the next person, and I'd like
we now have a
recorded
challenge
vote.
to the chair.
Yes.
And I would rule that I am at the end. And I did warn the committee. I will tell you, I warned the committee a few weeks ago or months ago that if I felt the quorum was going, I would take the time and the clock would run while the members, and the members were all in the room at the time, that I would run the clock. And the clock is over 7 minutes. I have now been challenged on my ruling, which would be to go. I am now being challenged on my ruling that says that we have reached the end of Ms. Rempel's time to go to Ms. Kwan, and I would need to have a request for a recorded vote on whether or not you uphold my ruling.
Okay, so the motion is that the chair's decision be sustained. Ms. Rempel,
No.
Mr. Tilson,
No.
Mr. McGuire,
No.
Ms. Kwan,
Yes.
Mr. Ayub,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Whalen,
Yes.
Mr. Sarai,
Yes.
Mr. Tabara,
Yes.
Ms. Zaid.
Yes.
Thank you. We continue now with Ms. Kwan for 7 minutes. Thank you.
Point
thank
of
you
order,
very
Mr.
much.
Chair. I'd just like to point out that you shut down a woman asking questions about money being spent by this government. Thank you.
And I would remind the committee I shut down a member whose time had elapsed, regardless of gender.
May I start my time now, Mr. Chair?
Yes, your full time.
Thank you so much. As a woman, I like to ask these questions. So to the Minister of Immigration, back in June, you announced the initial funding, $50 million for Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba to deal with the influx of inland asylum seekers crossing over irregularly into Canada. Yet British Columbia, who is the second province with the highest claims, British Columbia did not receive any money from the government to manage that situation. Why is that?
Ms. Kwan, I appreciate you asked the question of my colleague, but if I may, the money that we have placed in the estimates, $100 million, is to support all of the provinces. For the extraordinary costs that they have incurred, there have been ongoing discussions between ourselves and all of the provinces, including British Columbia, and those discussions will continue. We understand that, historically, providing support to people who come to this country seeking refuge and seeking asylum has been a shared responsibility between municipalities, provinces, and the federal government. And we know that some have experienced an extraordinary cost, and we're working very hard to make sure that we support them.
Well, British Columbia also experienced extraordinary costs as well. And in fact, NGOs on the ground who's been trying to do this work on their own without federal dollars met with the Minister of Immigration, Minister Hassan, and asked for money, and that was refused. And so this ongoing pressure continues to exist in our community today. So perhaps, Minister Blair, you can provide confirmation then that that British Columbia will get resources, and recognizing that British Columbia is the second province with the highest numbers of inland refugee claims with irregular crossers.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. And what I can confirm is that the BC minister has written to me. Our senior officials have connected. Discussions are ongoing, and we are absolutely committed to working with all of the provinces to make sure that where they have experienced extraordinary costs, the federal government is there to support them. And that is why we've placed this money in the estimates to allow us to provide that support.
Well, I'll look forward to seeing the numbers and dollars diverted to British Columbia, because the need is real and NGOs are struggling. There was one NGO, in fact, could not sustain this to the point where the staff were so stressed about having to turn people away to shelters and so on that they invited them to their homes. Can you imagine frontline staff workers have refugees go to their home to prevent homelessness? That is the reality that we're dealing with. We don't make the headlines because we don't scream and shout, and we try to do this cordially. And so I asked both ministers to ensure that dollars are diverted to British Columbia accordingly. And I would certainly look forward towards that in the budget 2019 budget. I'm going to move away from that for a minute. One of the issues that has risen both at committee with ministers who've come forward to say a better investment in managing the situation, particularly with respect to housing, is instead of putting the money into hotels, which is currently what's happening, is to invest that into a long-term plan. And in fact, we had witnesses come to our committee, Journey to Home, suggest that we actually build the housing in terms of permanent housing, and that could be utilized over and over again without having to pay a hotel bill. That proposal has been tabled to the committee. It will be coming to the minister, and I believe that there are meetings with the ministers with respect to that from the organizations themselves. Is that something that the government will entertain?
What I can tell you is that we work very closely with municipalities and the provinces who actually provide these services. The determination on how and where people will be sheltered on a temporary basis while they undergo these processes is the responsibility of the municipalities, and we have been working to support them for the extraordinary costs that they have experienced. And so we don't place a limit on or a requirement on how they will make that provide that temporary shelter. And so there have been discussions with a number of jurisdictions who are exploring a number of different alternatives for providing that housing. And we are providing assistance in the support they're providing.
So the proposal is in need of major infrastructure dollars so that you can build that housing, which, by the way, the province of British Columbia, BC Housing, is in support of. And then a number of other NGOs in the community support this as well. So if the minister hasn't seen the proposal already, I'd be happy to hand that over to the minister in the House at a later date so that he can take a look at this, because I do think that there can be a long-term strategy instead of investing dollars in hotels, that you can actually build a permanent housing that can be used over and over again whenever there's a influx. And as the minister acknowledged, these are irregular crossers, and they're coming to Canada according to Canadian law and in accordance with international obligations to which Canada is a signatory to. So I'm going to leave that. Now, on this question in terms of processing time, one of the issues is with the IRB. The IRB did receive 2 years of funding, $74 million for 2018-19, but the rate in which the number of cases are increasing, which is up to 2,500 per month. That means the backlog is to the tune of 30,000 per year. So this is significant in terms of the backlog. And so in order to get ahead of this, the government just tried to deal with legacy cases to try and get ahead of it. We're actually creating Legacy 2.0 right now, unless if there's additional dollars provided to the IRB to clear this influx of backlog, because right now the claims are sitting there. It is taking at least 2 years to process them. So will there be additional dollars provided to the IRB so that we don't create Legacy 2.0?
First of all, I'm happy to update you that the Legacy Task Force.
I don't need an update. I'm just asking a specific question
I can go
about will
straight to
there
the
be
IRB.
additional
No
dollars?
problem. The investments have resulted in the hiring of 248 new staff and 64 decision makers. That should add to the processing of 17,000 asylum claims. In addition to that,
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I don't mean to be rude because I'm limited in time. I just need to know whether or not for Budget 2019, has the minister requested additional dollars for the IRB so that we don't end up with a situation of Legacy 2.0? It's just a yes or no answer.
Well, it's not a yes or no answer because it's not just a question of money. It's also a question of what the IRB itself has done to speed up the process, the reforms.
Sorry, but my question is about resources. Have you requested
We have
additional
provided resources in Budget 2018, $74 million, 248 new staff, 64 new judges. That will make a big difference, plus the reforms.
to end you there. We're over time now. Ms. Zahid.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is for Minister Blair. Minister, if you can please let us know here at the committee that what are our obligations under the Canadian law for the people who cross the border, or like specifically for the asylum seekers under the Canadian law, what are our obligations?
Very succinctly, under obligations by international convention and Canadian law, anyone who enters the country, regardless of how they enter, including whether they do it at a regular point of entry or irregularly across any part of our 9,000-kilometer border with the United States, and makes a claim for asylum. First of all, it is unlawful to enter at anything other than a point of entry, so they are immediately detained by the RCMP at that point. And if they make a claim for asylum, they are then determined whether or not there is any aspect of criminality or national security threat, or whether they are, for any other reason, ineligible to make that claim. That determination is made by both the RCMP and CBSA and IRCC right at the border. If they make that claim, they are entitled under our law to due process, to a hearing. And there are a number of other provisions in that law for other, reviews and appeals as well. Due process and in the law is provided in our legislation, and they are entitled to do that. And additionally, we have other provisions in our law that for example, give them eligibility for health services while they are going through that due process. It was something we added back, quite frankly, because it had been removed, and our courts had determined that to be unlawful, and in fact, I think they called it cruel and unusual punishment, which was, something that needed to be fixed. Once those hearings are completed, and the person, if they are determined to be eligible for asylum, then they are then settled as asylum refugees, and if it is determined that they are not in need of Canada's protection, they are then subject to removal.
Thank you. My next question is also for you as Toronto area MP. I have heard both from my constituents as well as from the mayor of Toronto about the impact asylum seekers have had on the availability of affordable housing and shelter space, specifically in Toronto. So could you please discuss how your department is working directly with the city to help address those concerns, as well as what collaborative role, if any, the provincial government is playing to coordinate the response with the federal government and the municipal governments?
Just before you begin, I do need unanimous consent for us to continue. I wouldn't want to interrupt a strong or weak man or woman. If you would like to continue, we need unanimous consent.
Yes.
Agreed. That just see how long I have unanimous consent for.
Okay.
We'll make sure you get to vote on time. Mr. Blair.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. First of all, let me say that we recognize that we've seen an increase in people who are seeking asylum, both through regular points of entry and irregularly, which has put pressures on municipalities and provinces right across the country. And we have been working very hard to make sure that we support those provinces. It is my strong preference to do provide that support through provincial governments. And we have had, I would say, various experiences. It has been somewhat challenging, but we are in ongoing discussions with the province of Ontario. I'm very pleased that Ontario has recently accepted the establishment of a working group of senior officials so that we can better understand the pressures that the province is experiencing. We have been working very directly also with the City of Toronto, which has experienced the largest impact of people entering into the country seeking asylum, both through regular points of entry and through a regular entry. And so we have been providing services and support in the City of Toronto and with the City of Toronto. And let me say as well, they have been an excellent partner to us. We have provided $26 million to address the immediate temporary housing shortages for asylum claimants in the City of Toronto. We're also working very closely with the City of Ottawa and other municipalities. But the work, I think, is important work, continues, because as I indicated in an earlier response, all three orders of government have historically shared the responsibility to ensure that those who are in our country seeking asylum and undertaking that due process to which under our law they are entitled. We have always worked very collaboratively between the municipalities, the provinces, and the federal government, and we endeavor to continue to do so.
Thank you. Before I ask my next question, I would like to say, Chair, something that I, as a person, I think I should always be judged based on my work, not on my gender.
And you are.
My next question is for Minister Hussain. Can you please speak to the government's progress in facilitating the settlement and integration of newcomers to Canada? Specifically, could you update the committee here today on the program to provide some extra support to visible minority women?
Yes.
Because I hear a lot from them in my riding.
Settlement and integration is a key priority for our government. That is why, since 2015, we've increased the investments in settlement and integration programs by 30%. 30% increase. Why? Because we believe that giving the right tools to newcomers to succeed faster in Canada is in Canada's best interests. And in terms of the program that you referred to, it was in budget 2018. It was an investment made to enable visible minority newcomer women who were lagging behind newcomer men to be able to access the workforce faster and enable them to be able to find employment and succeed in Canada.
1 minute.
Recently, the government introduced the rural immigration pilot. So could you please speak to the purpose of introducing that pilot project, and how will immigration help address the specific needs of the rural communities throughout Canada?
Rural Canada contributes almost 30% to our GDP. Yet 78% of all newcomers are going into the main cities and not to the smaller communities, and therefore we felt that there was a need to address the request made by many employers and municipal leaders and community leaders in rural Canada and northern Canada that they needed more workers, more talent, more skills to come in through our immigration system, and they felt that the best way to do that is to replicate some aspects of the Atlantic immigration program and have a rural focus. And so we launched the rural and northern immigration pilot program so that rural Canada can benefit from the benefits of immigration.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
That's the end time. I just want to confirm, do we still have unanimous consent to continue? Okay. Just before you do, and because we may get cut off quickly, Ms. Kwan had a comment. I'm going to take this now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, I know that we're going to get interrupted by the bells with votes, and we have yet to have the opportunity to ask questions from the officials. And I would like to make the request that the officials be scheduled for another time so that we would have that opportunity to undertake that work, Mr. Chair.
So I think that there's agreement that we would bring the officials back at some point. They may have to be back on the subject matter of the estimates as opposed to the estimates themselves. We don't know exactly when we have to report on the estimates, but it would be on the same, but it may be after the reporting date due to our scheduling. We have a number of meetings scheduled, but if you would agree to come back, I think the committee has all agreed with that. All right. Monsieur Paul Hoos.
Mr. Pierre-Paul Hoos. Thank you, Chair. Ministers, first of all, I'm pleased to see at this committee there are 2 confirmations. Minister Blair, you said that it was illegal to cross the border between regular border crossings, and in the supplementary estimates, we see the government's official document. We see $114 million to support the increased demand from asylum seekers. So now, Minister Blair, you talked in your opening comments, both of you, in fact, spoke about security checks. And I'd ask questions in question period. You didn't have an answer. Now we're talking about 2,500 people who had no security checks. I'd like to know if you think that is acceptable.
Actually, when asked that question, I then sought and later on that day got information, and when that information was provided to the media about those who were not at the border but in fact undergoing and involved in the process of determining their security background check. A second security background check takes place in those processes. The CBSA added additional resources, approximately $6 million, in the summer immediately after that ATIP was responded to, and the entire backlog has been cleared.
So you're saying that currently there are no backlog at all? There's no backlog at all. Everybody had their check. Can you confirm?
I just, as I said, the entire backlog has been cleared.
Parfait. Là,
Perfect. Currently, 540 Border Services officers are stopping their work to go to the entry points. There's a lot in Quebec, obviously, but also throughout the provinces where there are border crossings at regular or irregular spots. You talked about the RCMP, and the government spent on the RCMP $6.6 million to look after the Roxham Road area. There are problems in Canada, including arms trafficking. Do you think this is a problem?
I think it is the responsibility of both the RCMP and CBSA to maintain the integrity and security of our borders. They have deployed their resources quite appropriately to the places that it is required. And my understanding in my discussion with the leadership of CBSA is that they have redeployed resources in order to respond to irregular crossings at our border, and that it has had no negative impact on their operational capabilities.
Donc, ce qui était toujours dit de votre part depuis un an.
So what has been said for the last year is that the Conservatives cut the budgets and there were problems, but you're telling us today that the 540 agents that are deployed to look after the border can continue the work and the other work is still being done? How?
Added additional resources to both CBSA and RCMP, and they have been effective in redeploying their resources to where they are needed. That's sort of the nature of deploying those resources. There was, the impact of significant reductions in their funding. About $390 million, as I understand it, was cut from the CBSA, and about a little over $500 million cut by the RCMP. A total of $1.2 billion cut for security services generally during the previous government, and we've been working hard to restore that capacity.
Je voudrais juste rappeler au comité que
I just want to remind the committee that in 2018, the Deputy Minister of Public Safety said that the money that was invested, well, I can give you an example. Funding was allocated to major projects. These projects were undertaken, and the overall budget decreased. It's not cuts. They were investments. Thank you. A problem with regard to illegal crossings now. The parliamentary budget officer said that it would cost $1.5 billion. And this creates chaos in the immigration system. But what's of grave concern for us is the fact that at Cornwall had become the new standard. The new way of doing things was normal, and this had to be a regular process. Do you think that the Safe Third Country Agreement should be changed, or do you think it's normal for people to do things this way?
Pleased to advise this committee that
Very briefly.
I have reached out to the Homeland Security Secretary in the United States. There are ongoing discussions between myself and our officials with the United States on the ways in which we may be able to modernize the Safe Third Country Agreement to the mutual benefit of both countries.
Thank you. Mr. Tavera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the ministers and the department officials for being here. We're talking about funds being allocated to the border, and we're talking about 192 million increase in resources. I just want to go back to a CTV article, and I'm just going to read the following. The union representing Canada's custom agents and border guards says cuts at the Canada Border Service Agency threaten public safety. So CBSA has been told to cut 143 million, according to this article. It put 1,100 CBSA employees. Their jobs were on the line. And Minister Blair, you were just mentioning an even larger number of cuts. What does this do in terms of resources at the border? If we're slashing and cutting funding, what is this doing to our border, to the resources that we allocate to the professionals that are securing our borders?
Yeah, in my discussions with our senior officials at CBSA and the RCMP, I remain confident that they have adequately deployed sufficient resources to maintain safety and security and integrity of our borders. There will also be an opportunity at the upcoming SECU meeting where the actual budgets and allocations for CBSA and other departments will be discussed perhaps more fulsomely.
And you mentioned to one of your questions from the opposition that the situation is being managed safely. Can you just briefly describe again how CBSA is, as soon as an individual comes to our borders and claims asylum, at the beginning, what is CBSA? What type of resources are they going through, the procedures to ensure that those that are claiming asylum are who they are? And
again, briefly, I've actually gone to Lacal and stood at the end of Roxham Road, and I've watched our officers and officials deal with individuals coming across. And if in every case the individual is detained as they cross, there's a determination of why they have come across. They are arrested and detained, and if they make a claim of asylum, at that point in time, there are investigations and security background checks that begin by both the RCMP and the CBSA. There are a number of international and local police or national databases that are checked, and as well their documents. If they are coming from the United States and are in their possession other travel documents, that they have obtained visas or other means by which they've come into the United States. There is also inquiries and information available to our officers with respect to the background screening that they took to enter into the United States. There are inquiries and investigations made of those individuals to determine the veracity of their identity and to ensure that there is no risk of criminality or national security threat. Biometrics are taken. The individuals are fingerprinted and photographed at the border so that we may have, a reliable, permanent, and usable record to identify those individuals. And that background check is done, and it's quite thorough and I think quite appropriate to ensure that there is no risk to Canadian public safety as these people enter into the process of determining their eligibility to stay.
thank you. And I want to shift my next question to Minister Hussein. The previous immigration minister visited early on in 2016. He visited the KW region, and he met with a lot of stakeholders in the high-tech sector. And the number one challenge that they were mentioning to the minister at the time was to fill these high-tech sector jobs. We get a lot of individuals that are graduating from University of Waterloo. We do employ locally, and we do get a lot of talent from Waterloo, but they were still not matching the job vacancies. If you can speak a little bit to the global skills strategy and how you've mentioned here in your notes that it filled 30,000 vacancies across Canada. If you can speak more to that.
Thank you. A very important question. The global skills strategy was an attempt by our government, a successful attempt to really streamline the attraction of highly skilled talented temporary workers to Canada, because businesses were saying it was just taking too long, 7 months. Now it's down to 2 weeks, and as a result of the global skills strategy, many businesses have been able to get that talent, and investment follows talent. So it's a play for that global, highly mobile global talent to come to Canada, and as a result of of listening to business and introducing the global skills strategy and making other changes to the express entry system, which I can go into detail if there's time.
There is not.
We are leading the world in talent attraction, and one of the main reasons they point out to is our immigration system.
Thank you, Minister. We could carry on. I'm getting concerned about time. Do I have unanimous consent to continue?
I think we need to call it now.
Okay. Just before we go, I want to do three things. We mentioned University of Waterloo. I want to mention Wilfrid Laurier University, which I understand we have some students here from Wilfrid Laurier. So welcome and thank you for joining us, and always happy to meet with students. Secondly, to thank the ministers and officials. The officials will be called back. I'm not exactly sure when, but thank you both ministers for joining us today. The last thing I want to note is just our meetings next week. We will have 3 meetings next week. to meet our agenda. So we're going to be having a meeting on Monday and Wednesday and Thursday of next week. And those meetings will complete the migration study. One meeting on Latin America, one meeting on labor demand, and one meeting on temporary foreign workers and labor supply. And that meeting is Thursday, 3:30 to 5:30. The meeting is adjourned.